Hello, everybody out there tuning in to the second part, or the first part, depending on where you start looking, where I, Anna Bjärkerud, sit in Stockholm in Sweden, the capital of Sweden, and have tuned in to the other side of the world to meet up with Richard. Richard, could you introduce yourself and the company that you work for?
Happy to, Anna. Yeah, the other side of the world, in this case being the Washington, D.C. area in the U.S. And my name's Richard Waugh, Vice President Corporate Development at Zycus. And Zycus is a market-leading provider of an integrated suite of source-to-pay software tools spanning the end-to-end sourcing and procurement processes. So things like spend analytics, sourcing, contract and supplier management, procure-to-pay, and financial savings management. So my pleasure to join you today.
Thank you. And I mean, you did kind of just mention it, but I still think that even though we use terminologies as source to pay and they are quite straightforward, I sometimes have a feeling that we don't have a clearly common understanding. Could you say, what does source to pay mean for you?
Yeah, for me, it's probably easiest to kind of segment source to pay between upstream and downstream processes. So the upstream, also sometimes referred to as strategic procurement, would really have as its foundation spend analytics. So deriving insights from looking at corporate spending patterns to understand how much you're buying, from whom, and which quantities, to then formulate category and strategic sourcing strategies, and then execute those strategies through a sourcing capability. So ERFX, if you will, online auctions on occasion. And then at the culmination of that negotiation, putting in place through contract management of the executed agreements with those suppliers. Of course, you're not done when you've negotiated the contract. Now I have to onboard those suppliers, so supplier management tools as well, both for the initial onboarding of those new supplier relationships, as well as the ongoing performance management and tracking of the supplier. So that kind of comprising the strategic procurement or upstream phase, then segueing into the downstream procurement or operational phase. So now that I've determined who my suppliers are going to be, I've put in place agreements. Now I have the ongoing replenishment, the requisitioning, ordering, and ultimately payment for products and services from my network of suppliers. So procure-to-pay, for example, and kind of the output of that process then being able to track the results, being able to report on the value that's delivered to the business in the form of, cost reduction, if from a financial savings standpoint, but also increasingly a top-line contribution coming from procurement in terms of new supplier innovation, new products and services that emanate from the supply base through that procurement-led supplier relationship management. So it's a very, very broad process, if you will, encompassing both the strategy and the execution and the operationalization of those strategies, and it involves not just procurement but all the business functions to make it as effective as possible.
And of course today it's impossible to talk about processes and structures without also talking about digitizing and digitalization within all kinds of different areas. Procurement and finance and sourcing are not left out of that. To what extent do you think that digitizing source to pay can help increase control, visibility, and compliance, etc.?
I think the potential is huge, Anna, and I think one of the reasons the potential is so vast and so exciting in terms of the opportunity is that the technology has really evolved so significantly. We're really talking about not just enabling processes, but now applying advanced technologies like artificial intelligence, AI, or machine learning to increase exponentially the efficiency and effectiveness of the procurement function. Although I'll tell you that when we talk about machine learning, I think sometimes we put the cart before the horse a little bit. So I like to think about leveraging AI and other tools in the context of machine teaching. So digitization is a way to capture accurate data at the source such that you're teaching your machines, essentially with the best curriculum and the best professors, if you will, thinking about an educational context. Your machines are only going to learn as well as they're taught in the first place. And that's a conundrum that most businesses face today, is if you got the garbage in, garbage out syndrome. So if my data at the source is inaccurate, incomplete, fragmented, and flawed, the machine learning that's going to result is going to be the same: incomplete, inaccurate, fragmented, and flawed. So, at Zycus, for instance, although AI has sort of come into vogue recently as kind of a buzzword in the industry, for us it's been part of the core DNA since the very inception. So when we launched our flagship product, which was spend analytics, and the flagship customer was my former employer, General Electric, it was infused with artificial intelligence. So AI has been used to accurately categorize and classify purchase transactions, to be able to then apply machine learning to look at the patterns in the data and recognize opportunities from it. And we've continued that focus on AI in really proliferating and propagating artificial intelligence throughout the source-to-pay suite. So the opportunity here that's so compelling is leverage, because there are vast amounts of data that we're dealing with here, right? We're talking about, for most businesses, thousands or tens of thousands of suppliers, hundreds of millions, if not billions, in purchase transactions. So it's the kind of thing that's ideally suited for AI and machine learning, because just the sheer volume of data is really beyond the grasp of mere mortals like us, right? It's a job that's better suited to machines to synthesize and analyze data, and then free up and really take advantage of human intelligence and creativity and ingenuity to then interpret that data. And the problem is we got too many people spending time on tactical, mundane tasks in gathering data instead of analyzing data. Let the machines gather the data, put it into a meaningful analytical framework for you, so that now I can make strategic decisions. So, in terms of the opportunity, it starts, as I said, with machine teaching. Capture data correctly and accurately at the source, leveraging tools like AI. So AI can, in our model, really look at multiple cues or clues in the data to identify exactly what category a particular transaction should be in. That gives me visibility to say, how much at a very granular level am I actually spending for a given product or service with a supplier? Be able to roll that up and look at, sometimes suppliers are part of a diverse network, and really applying a parent-child relationship so that I can aggregate total spending with a supplier on a global basis, and therefore enter into negotiations from really a position of strength, because it's now fact-based and data-driven. I know, what I'm spending with the supplier, how I can execute more effectively. So it really goes from that machine teaching to machine learning. And I think the other opportunity these days is adopting a single platform across the entire source-to-pay process. So in the past, from a digitization standpoint, organizations may have deployed discrete point solutions for different phases of the process. I've got one tool for my Procure-to-Pay, a different sourcing tool, maybe yet another tool for contract management or supplier management and onboarding. But the advent of integrated source-to-pay platform means I can truly have now one version of truth. If I can enter data once at the source, make sure it's accurate, and it carries through. That supplier record is the same if I'm looking at how much I'm buying from that supplier in spend analytics. It's the same when I'm measuring their performance with a supplier scorecard, or when I'm looking at negotiating with that supplier in the sourcing phase. I've got that single version of truth when it comes to the data that's captured correctly and accurately at the source. So AI and machine learning has tremendous potential. The other area, of course, is RPA, robotics process automation. So a lot of people fear that the revenge of the robots are going to take over the world. We're not quite talking about R2-D2 here, right? We're really talking about software programs. We talk about bots. So one of the things that we've announced recently at Zycus is our Merlin AI Studio. And what that is actually a smorgasbord, if you will, of bots that can be deployed to perform more of the routine tasks in the business. So this is what's so exciting. I think there's some wariness in the market overall that things like AI and RPA are only going to result in redundancies and reduction in force, taking people's jobs. And I think the reality is that the bots have the potential to perform those tasks that humans don't really want to do. People don't get up in the morning and say, gee, I'd like to go do some data entry, or I'd like to go grab multiple files from all these disparate systems and join the tables together so that I've got something that I can really work with. Those are things the bots will do very efficiently and effectively. And oh, by the way, they'll do it 24/7, and they never take a day off. And they do exactly what they're told because they're software programs. But the potential here means let's leverage that menu of bots, as I mentioned in our case with our Merlin AI Studio, and that frees up people to be much more strategic and creative because they're not spending their days just gathering data or just entering data. They're analyzing, interpreting, and acting on the insights that they get from the analytics.
And I mean, even though technology has developed more or less like this, we have seen different type tools out there for a long time, and I believe I have yet to meet a large company that have made it all the way, that really have all of that data and all of those processes intact and are really enabling the strategies they have set out to enable. Why is that, you think? Where are the challenges still?
Great question. And I do think it's important to think about digital transformation as a journey, not as the destination. And that means that the journey sort of never really ends. You're always on this path towards continuous improvement. So you're right. It would be hard to point to someone who says we've conquered every challenge when it comes to digitization, and our source-to-pay process is immaculate and efficient and cannot be improved further. Nevertheless, there is a huge discrepancy between what is actually being achieved by the best-in-class performers, typically the top 20%, and everyone else. So the good news is if you're everyone else, you're an average performer, or maybe if you're really mired in a completely manual process today, you may be below average, but that means your upside potential for performance improvement is so great to really close the gap, in that case. And I think it's just a exciting opportunity for so many businesses today. But I think that there are a number of factors that create the challenges to digitization. One is looking at your current organizational structure and technical architecture. So many businesses have multiple different divisions. They're operating globally, so they have those kind of coordination challenges within their own enterprise. But then from a technology infrastructure standpoint, they may have a very disparate and fragmented back-end structure. So working with one customer today that's going through the transformation process that has over 40 different back-end ERP systems, having grown through merger and acquisition and those kinds of things. Every time I acquire a company, I've got a different ERP, and it's a different chart of accounts, general ledger, organizational structure. All those challenges are real, and they exist. But the opportunity with digitizing source to pay is, with all that back end complexity, sitting on top of that is to have one single version of truth, one standard end-to-end process that can give me that visibility and transparency that I need. And once I can do that, that single version of the truth means, you asked about visibility and transparency. So one of the reasons that we need visibility and transparency, of course, is to drive efficiency and effectiveness and so on. But the other is simply every organization is subject to some type of oversight. Industry regulation, external auditors, all those kinds of things. So having a system, and in our platform we call it Zytrack. And what Zytrack does is basically says, at any step in the process, I can go back to see, from an auditability and transparency standpoint, what was done by whom, why, and when, so that if a regulator or auditor is looking for effectiveness of internal controls, trying to understand why certain decisions were made, why did you award business to this supplier, who approved a contract or a purchase order, you've got that audit trail that's always there because it's logged in the system and it's retrievable and reportable. So compliance is a major issue, for every organization. So digitization is not just about driving efficiencies and improving performance of the function. It's about being able to ensure compliance with the various forms of oversight that exist for every business. So that's true transparency and visibility.
And so the final question for you, Richard, if you place yourself in the shoes of a CEO, a CPO, or a CFO, considering what type people do I need to have to be able to grasp all the possibilities that are out there? What's your advice?
I may be a bit of a contrarian on this point, Anna, just because when we've been talking about AI and machine learning and RPA, and the conventional wisdom would kind of lead you to say, well, the skill sets I need are data scientists. I need technical skill sets. And I think that the reality is, and the potential of these tools is, the systems themselves are inherently intelligent by applying the AI and other tools. So that actually reduces the requirement for that data analyst kind of skill set. If the system's producing the analytics for me, I don't have to deploy as many resources in that area. And what I instead would really want to focus on then is, business acumen to interpret data, to make strategic decisions, not so much to gather and analyze data, but to understand what the data patterns are telling me. Relationship management skills, to be able to more effectively collaborate with various business stakeholders to increase procurement's influence, whether that's measured by spend under management or by simply the willingness of other stakeholders to invite procurement to the table, to view the procurement function as a trusted business partner and not just a necessary evil that I have to engage when it's time to negotiate a contract. Bring them in earlier in the process, because that procurement function brings added value to the business stakeholder as a more of a consultant and trusted business partner. And I think the other thing is not to be overlooked. I mentioned business acumen and relationship management, but also change management and project management skills. So getting into the softer side, I know, Anna, in kind of, as I said, being that contrarian view, it's not about going and hiring a bunch of data scientists. It's really focusing more on those softer skills, because the reality of a digital transformation for sourcing and procurement is the technology bit is actually the easy part. Because the technologies themselves have evolved so significantly and are much, much more mature, that the bigger challenge for most enterprises ends up being the human side of transformation, changing behaviors, change management, project management, to be able to coordinate all the different roles and responsibilities, not just in the procurement function, not just even within the four walls of the enterprise, if you think about it. So part of it is procurement engaging various internal stakeholder groups, but to make true transformation happen in the sourcing and procurement world, it has to reach outside of the enterprise and the four walls to incorporate suppliers. So onboarding suppliers, being able to collaborate with them more effectively, being able to enable them through a variety of technologies. So not just the largest suppliers, your top tier suppliers that are already e-commerce capable will easily conduct business with you through a standard protocol like CXML or EDI, but engaging more of the small and mid-sized suppliers that aren't as sophisticated technically, and that means kind of meeting them where they live. That may mean it's more effective for some of the smaller suppliers to collaborate with you through a mobile application or through just a portal interface. So part of the role is therefore expanded to be able to manage these transformation projects on a global scale, both within the enterprise and on an inter-enterprise basis with the supply base overall.
And that really sits with everything that I've ever learned working within this area. I think it's a great final saying that at the end it's about changing behavior and people. And thank you again, Richard, for sharing your years and years of know-how. A really exciting company you work at, and thank you for sharing a bit of that, and have a really, really beautiful day.
Thank you so much, Anna. My pleasure. Enjoyed it. You as well.
Thank you.